So you're telling us, I think, that we do not all have to jump on top of following every trend in every type of clothing that comes out every season. Am I correct in saying that?
I would rarely ever push my clients into a trend unless it was something that they were really passionate about or one that truly suited them.
Are you ready to live your best life, make healthy choices, have success, have fun, and still have time for everything else? I'm here to teach you how to do that, and we'll all learn together from guests along the way as well. Follow along for some powerful tips on cultivating gratitude, making healthy choices for mind and body, and having fun doing it. What if all the angst and worry actually don't help? Oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do this differently.
OMG, hello, my friends. We are talking about style today, and I am excited about this episode because I find this to be a really fun topic. Part of the reason that I'm here doing this podcast is so we can live well and feel great. And that includes how we show up in the world and how we feel about how we show up in the world. My guest today is Amanda Gauger, and we connected online through our interest in color and style. She has been a fount of information for me as I've been learning more about this. Amanda has been driven by a love for personal style for as long as she can remember, and that starts with her childhood years carrying her fashion plates everywhere, which I think is hilarious because I loved them too, and it dates us both, to her college years where she was the go-to girl for makeovers or dressing her friends for interviews and date nights, to her current livelihood as an image consultant and influencer. She has always loved helping women discover what makes us look and feel our most beautiful. She has a formal education with Cancel Institute of Image Management and learned under Judith Rasband, who is the longest tenured image consultant in the world. Amanda loves guiding her clients to determine the best style for their unique body architectures, preferences, and lifestyles, and says that small changes can make a big impact. And I think that's such an empowering concept as well. So welcome, Amanda.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am excited to chat about this topic. And in my head, style is just such a fun topic to talk about. So let's start with this. How, even though I said some of it just now, you tell us, how did you get interested in style, would you say?
I guess I would probably just say I was born interested in this. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I just remember having this passion inside of me. And my mom would tell you that I was like the sassiest little kid, like even critiquing her outfits. And so I think I've just always kind of had a knack for it. And as I've, gotten older and explored it more, I've kind of worked with some industry professionals who have said, you are just really gifted at this. And so I think that encouragement combined with my passion for it has really just led me kind of to take the leap into doing this professionally.
I love that. And I do fully agree that sometimes people just have a gift for something. And when you can discover that, then, I mean, goodness, that's like work equals joy, basically.
Definitely.
So I am curious about this whole concept of different body structures. And so, we're not just talking about size. I recognize that. I don't know if the listeners recognize that yet, but how would you describe what you mean by body architecture or body structure? And, what do we mean when we talk about that?
Yeah. So I think another great word for it is body composition. It's really how your body is uniquely made from, height is going to be part of it, but it's more than just your measurements. You can break the body down into the shapes that it is comprised of. There's a lot of different things that go into your body architecture or your body composition. Your vertical measurements and quadrants of the body are going to play a role in that. A lot of us have probably thought about maybe what shape our face is, but your body is also comprised of shapes. You may have heard the analogies to fruit, like pear-shaped or apple-shaped. I don't like the fruit kind of measurements. I like, using real shapes when we're talking about our body architecture. So there are a multitude of different shapes that your body can fit into. And I think that that's just an easier way to talk about body dynamics and architecture.
That's interesting. And so does it have a lot to do with maybe shoulders, waist, hips, and kind of how they relate to each other? Is that a piece of it?
Yeah, so we have both worked in a system where they talk about kind of are you chiseled out of stone or are you molded out of clay? And so that I think is a very good analogy to start thinking about like the shape of your face. Is it softer and more molded or is it chiseled and more angular? So then we can kind of apply the same concepts to your body. Do you have a very sharp, linear, angular body or do you have a more softed, full, curved, rounded body? So we're going to talk about that kind of in theory and the concepts of the shapes, but then instead of talking about fruit in relation to your body, what you may have heard referred to as a pear shape, I would refer to as a triangle, where you're going to be wider through the hip. An inverted triangle is wider through the shoulders and then very narrow at the hip. You could be a rectangular shape. You could be very rounded. So there are a multitude of different shapes. You would also want to take into account your vertical measurements. So breaking the body down into quadrants, you're usually measuring from the top of your head kind of to the armpit, from the armpit to the hip break, from the hip break to the knee break, and the knee break to the floor. So when you talk about your vertical quadrants, people are going to have very different measurements that way. I want to know about your bust to hip ratio as well, but it's really not about weight. It's about proportion and vertical measurements and where do your proportions fall and how do we dress the body accordingly?
Right, right. And it's interesting because one of the shapes that I have always heard talked about is hourglass. We all need to have an hourglass figure, and that's a certain waist and then bust and hips and everything. And I liked this concept of everybody having different shapes because maybe that is someone's shape, but that doesn't mean it's the best or not the best. Or, we all just have a certain shape to our body, right?
Yes, an hourglass is one of the shapes that I would work with as well.
We are not fruit. That's the first lesson for today. So you're telling us, I think, that we do not all have to jump on top of following every trend in every type of clothing that comes out every season. Am I correct in saying that?
I would rarely ever push my clients into a trend unless it was something that they were really passionate about or one that truly suited them. Chasing trends is exhausting and it's expensive. Figuring out what works for someone's unique body architecture will serve them for a lifetime of success in their own personal style, much more than a passing trend.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I, just from my layman's perspective, would say that every few years, a new trend comes out that really looks hideous on me. And I might try it on, but thankfully, I finally realized that I need to pay attention to what actually looks good on me and not worry about what it looks like on someone else. And so I appreciate you saying that, because just because a magazine says that something is in doesn't mean it's going to work for each of us, right?
Right. And I think as we age, I would hope that most of us care less about the trends and just care about representing ourselves in the most authentic manner. And so I think that's why personal style is so important. I would say that individual personal style has lots of different factors. Personal colors, that are best for you can play into it. Individual style archetypes, yin and yang. That's a little bit more advanced. But I find that starting with understanding your unique body architecture, the shapes and measurements, of your face and body is the best starting point. When I work with my clients, I'll first evaluate their shapes and then their vertical measurements. And then, that determines what part of the body we want to emphasize and then what part of the body we want to counter or balance. And that is really going to be so uniquely personalized to each individual body. So it's really nothing that's kind of just a hard and fast rule, or again, a passing trend is not going to work for everyone.
Right, right. And so following on that, can you give, I realize this is a podcast, so you can't see what Amanda's pointing to or describing, but let's see if we can do it. Can you give an example of maybe a part of someone's body that they would want to emphasize or de-emphasize and how they might do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use one of my clients as an example. I'll call her Christy. I don't think that gives too much away. But Christy came to me after having worked with another company and it just wasn't feeling right. So Christy is inverted triangle shape. That means that she has broad shoulders and a large bust, especially for her petite frame. She's only about 5'1", a size 0 to 2. She's got a flat tummy. And even though she's short, for her body and her measurements, she has fairly longer legs. And so one of the things that she was doing before we started working together. She does love a very feminine style. And so she was wearing a lot of puff sleeve tops and then skinny jeans. And if you can imagine that in your brain, a puff sleeve is going to really add volume at the shoulder, and a skinny jean is going to narrow the legs. And so what she was doing was really emphasizing her shape, but it wasn't balancing her properly. So after we worked together, we got her to try some different shapes. I took away a puff sleeve and I want her to wear something that's a little bit more fitted through the shoulder. That's not going to add any width in the shoulder. I like her to have an open neckline, but I would never put her in a square neck top. A square neck is going to really widen her shoulders. I like something that's open, but very narrowing. So it's going to draw the eye down and create more of a vertical line from the top of her head, kind of down towards the bust. And that narrow neckline is going to create a more slimming effect up top. And then I do want things that kind of nip in at the waist, but Christy is one who does very well with a peplum top. So that's going to add some volume at her hip where she's very, very narrow, and that's going to balance out the shoulder and just really create visual balance. Now, not every top that she wears is going to be a peplum. So if she's going to wear more of a traditional top, another great silhouette for her, because she has a longer leg line, is that she can do a cropped wide leg pant very well. Again, that's going to bring the eye down and add width to the bottom half of her body, which also balances out the shoulder. So it's all about creating balance with your proportions and your unique body architecture. We want to de-emphasize your largest part and really balance the body in the parts where you can kind of add some width.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as someone who at various times of my life has been trying to lose weight, when you say add some width, there's a little voice in my brain that goes, why would you add width? But I get it. It's balance.
It is. And so somebody, there might be a very different body type who is more rounded. And a lot of us, especially as we age, we carry weight in our midsections. So what we want to do there is kind of minimize. We want to emphasize the shoulder, and that's going to bring the eye up, minimizing the body width and the body weight by kind of pulling us in our wider part and creating that vertical line as well. So a woman who carries a lot of weight through her midsection might do very well in a layering effect, wearing kind of a darker blazer, or it could even be something very soft and drapey, but then a lighter color as that base layer. That's going to create a very vertical line, and that's going to help to kind of nip her in where she may be more self-conscious carrying weight through her midsection.
Oh, that's a great tip, because you're right. Sometimes as we age, we have to figure out how to deal with weight gain in the middle. Now, I'm sure at some point I will do an episode on gut health, so stay tuned for that if this is you, because we're going to talk about gut health related to weight gain in the middle. But that's a big issue. And I had never heard of, so you're saying maybe an open cardigan or a jacket or anything like that, where you could have something else showing as a vertical line down your middle. I think that's great.
Yeah. I mean, and it could be done with color blocking in a garment. It could be done with layering, even a longer pendant necklace, anything that's going to lead the attention inward away from the width of the body and create those vertical lines from the face downward. Creating vertical lines will always distract from the width of the body.
I love that. That's really smart. Okay, so I think that our listeners are going to get a lot out of both of those descriptions, whether we're trying to kind of narrow in the body that is a little bit larger relatively around waist or hips, or whether we have Christy, as you described. Do you have kind of a different structure that you could give us an example of too?
Yeah, so I would be categorized as an hourglass. I have a very different, set of measurements than Christy. I am 5'8", so I'm relatively tall. I think the average woman in the US is 5'4", so I'm definitely tall by average standards. And so when I'm talking about my vertical quadrants, quadrant 1, which is the top of my head to my armpit, is actually my shortest quadrant, which is tough for me because I'm actually somebody who loves a statement necklace and, big chunky jewels, but they're not always my best. I have, especially as a taller person, I have quite a short neck for my measurements. So you'll never see me in a turtleneck, and you're not going to see me in a choker. That's something that's going to really cut me in my shortest quadrant. My longest quadrant is from my knee to the floor. So similar to Christy, I'm somebody who does well in kind of a cropped flare style pant. I have extra length in that quadrant, so I can kind of afford to visually cut my leg line because my legs are so long. But when we're talking about my top quadrant, like I said, you'll never see me in like a turtleneck. I'm really good in an open neckline. My face shape is a soft diamond, so I'm not strong and angular, but my temples are kind of my widest part, so my face shape is a soft diamond. I look really good in an open neckline. It lengthens the neck, and one of the better shapes of necklines for me is a soft V-neck. It mimics the shape of my face. Even when you're thinking about neckline, mimicking the shape of your face is another great tip. Repetition in the body is always going to feel harmonious.
Part of healthy living is gut health. So much of our hormones, digestion, and nutrition centers around a healthy gut. Every morning, I use a green gut glow drink to make sure that my brain, skin, nails, hair, and gut are at their best, and to make sure that I get more veggies than I would eat otherwise. I felt a difference for sure. Grab yours or have a look at www.bit.ly/green gut glow plus, or just find it in the show notes.
So somebody who has a very round face is going to do much better in a rounder neckline. Somebody with a very sharp, angular jawline is going to do much better in an angular neckline. It's just about repetition. You'll always find harmony there. If you saw somebody with a very round body, round face, carrying more weight through the midsection, just a rounded frame, sharp, strong lines are going to feel disharmonious. And so think about that as just one of the real fundamental principles of dressing your body is repetition in what you're seeing. However you were born, repeating that, I think that that's just a very easy guiding principle when we're starting to dig into this at the very beginning.
I think that's fantastic, actually. And I don't know if I ever thought about it that way, because maybe I might have guessed the opposite, that I have an oval face, a little bit soft, certainly not distinct features, or how did you say, sharp features. And so I would have thought doing something different might be good, but I like this idea of repetition.
There are strategies within personal style where you can counter, what you're born with, but that would be a little bit more advanced. And I think that if any of your listeners are really just kind of getting started with this, that repetition is so much easier to tackle because, what do we know more intimately than our own bodies and our own, shapes and what's comprised of. When you're looking at the mirror, you'll be able to kind of look at yourself and really think through, what shapes is my body comprised of? And then it's not just, following your neckline, to your face shape. Are you a petite, small person? If usually a petite body is going to look good in a smaller scale pattern. There are exceptions to this rule. It's by no means, black and white, but it lends itself to repetition very easily. If you have a small frame and you put a very large pattern on your body, it may tend to overpower you. If you are taller or more full figured, you can usually lean into those larger scale patterns because it's going to feel harmonious with your body. A woman who is quite large, if she puts a ditzy little floral print onto her body, it's just going to feel unbalanced. So thinking about, the principles of repetition just makes it easier to tackle.
I love that. I think everyone's going to get a lot out of that for sure. Okay, so I brought up my face shape. Let me ask you this as well. I'm not terribly different from Christy that you described. I have broader shoulders, smaller waist, and definitely an inverted triangle. However, I have a long torso. So my legs are kind of my shorter part, which is maybe the opposite of her. So what tip might you give in terms of balance for me or someone like me?
So you are one of those lucky ladies that can probably shop for pants much easier now, because right now the stores are full of high-waisted pants. And most women, if you think about vertical measurements, have shorter torsos and longer legs. So a high-rise pant on a woman with a long leg and a shorter torso is going to make you look very disproportionate. For you, as someone with a long torso and shorter shorter legs, you could do well in a high-rise pant because that's actually going to help lengthen your leg line and balance you out in the torso. So that would be something unique to you that is not necessarily common with most women. Most women, and nobody wants to hear me say the word low rise, so I'll at least say mid-rise. Most women are better suited with a mid-rise pant so that they don't lose any length in their torso if they have a shorter torso.
So that explanation makes a lot of sense for me. And I think probably listeners are going to sort of know if they're a bit longer torso. Certainly the bathing suit shopping would have taught them that over the years, or whether their legs are longer. So this is really helpful. And actually, a consultant in the color company that Amanda and I are both familiar with has been trying to get me to tuck my shirts in more often. So I think that goes along with what you're saying, is that I don't need to show that my torso is so long. I need to bring my legs up. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, like if you're terrified of the idea of being a woman with a shorter torso and you're just comfortable in a high-rise denim, to hold you in, especially, most women that have become moms over the years, they just want to be held in. So if you really feel more comfortable in that high-rise jean, she would be the woman that I would say maybe you don't want to tuck. Maybe you are someone, if you have a shorter torso, that you do well in something that's untucked because that will lengthen the line of your torso and still allow you to wear a pant that, feels like it holds you in. So yeah.
Great tip. So tucking for the longer torso, not tucking for the shorter torso. Again, obviously there's exceptions to these rules, right? We're trying to simplify.
Yeah. But I mean, I think as you're starting to, play in this world, if it's not something that you've done before, thinking about those things in terms of your unique body and just standing in the mirror and saying, okay, let me try on these pants, with this top. Let me tuck it. Let me, partially tuck it. Let me leave it untucked and just look at what that does to the lines of your body and playing with those things and really figuring out what works best for you. I absolutely recommend that.
I think that's a great tip. Absolutely. Sometimes when you can see, speaking personally from experience, when you can see your whole body in the mirror and not just like half at a time, it really looked not quite like what we thought, right? So that's powerful.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So I think we've got some really good tips here in terms of this repetition idea, how to start thinking about shapes with your body, long torso versus legs, and all of the things that you've talked about. Are there other resources that maybe you could recommend to listeners who are wanting to get started with this and learn more?
Yeah, so I would say one easy thing to do, especially if you don't know the shape of your body, is most people would have a yardstick laying around the house. So I think a very easy exercise to do if you're not sure what your body shape is to grab a yardstick, and then above your armpit, there's kind of like this little spot in your shoulder, and it really is in line with your armpit. So I would take that yardstick and kind of fit the yardstick into that little groove in your shoulder, and then take the yardstick and then have it skim your hip, and then look in the mirror. Is it a straight line down? If so, you're probably either a rectangle or an hourglass. If you are a rectangle, then the yardstick is going to skim your midsection all the way down through your hip. If you are an hourglass, you can pass your fist through between your waist and the yardstick. If that yardstick is kind of flaring outward, then that would mean that you are a triangle because your hips are wider than that spot in your shoulder. If the yardstick is going inward, then you are probably wider in the shoulder and narrower in the hip, and so you are an inverted triangle. So starting to figure out those things is how you'll figure out your body shape. If your widest part is that midsection or tummy area and it is wider than your hip or your shoulder, then you would be a rounded body type.
Okay.
So that's kind of the first way to start to determine your body shape. Again, you can look at your face as we talked about to just determine the face shape, and if you are more angular or more soft and molded, and start to use those principles to kind of determine yourself. As far as, resources necessarily, I'm always going to say that working with a professional is your best bet. There's so much on the internet, but a lot of, theories can kind of get you stuck in a circle, going kind of back to the fruit type of thing. It's like, there's just so many different theories out there. A lot of them are in line, but for somebody who's really just kind of looking for some guidance, I would say try to find a professional professional that can really kind of get you on one focused path. The cost of a consultation to really help you understand your unique body architecture is always going to be so much less than, most of us waste on buying things that we never wear. I mean, especially I think for women, I would say that before you have any sort of analysis in this world, whether it be color or style or body architecture, we probably wear maybe 20% of what's in our closet. So if you think about it like that, I would say stop buying things that you don't wear, invest a couple $100, in working with a professional, and that's going to be something that lasts you a lifetime.
Yes, I fully agree. And I have done that. And that's kind of how we met. And it has changed everything about the way I dress, in fact. And I also agree that we tend not to wear a lot of what's in our closets. And so this doesn't necessarily have to do with style. But one of the tips I heard years ago about kind of paying attention to what clothes I wear and don't wear is to turn all the hangers around in my closet backwards. So they're hanging, they're hanging the other way than you would normally hang them. And then as I wear that item, turn it back around. And after 6 months or a year, anything that is still turned backwards clearly has not been worn. And that's pretty enlightening, I must say.
Absolutely. I love that strategy.
Yeah. And I think we kind of know, if we really pay attention, what we feel good in and maybe what things we wear that other people compliment us on. And if we pay attention to that, that gives some interesting clues too.
Definitely. I think there's so much that you can do in the world of personal style. And we've really only kind of scratched the surface today. Like I said, I think that somebody who's just diving into this, paying attention to their unique body architecture is just step one. And then from there, as you start to realize what feels comfortable and flatters your body more, then you can kind of venture further into the world of what colors may be best flattering for you and your body. Style archetypes is one thing that I just absolutely love to talk about. So there's kind of the yin and the yang and the archetypes that were founded by Belle Northrup. That's a whole nother kind of topic that you can go into. Where do you dress, in a more strong yang manner or in a more soft and delicate yin manner? So when you take all of the different aspects of personal style and meld them together, that's when you're going to really find that sweet spot for you. And there's just so much that you can do. And there's a whole world that you can unlock out there. But getting started with the basics of just, like we talked about, kind of repetition of your personal body shapes. I think that that's such an easy place to start. And you don't necessarily need a professional. Just start to play around with what God has given you and kind of the way that you were born.
Yeah. And if we think back to what we were talking about earlier, I guess it's repetition and it's balance. So if one part of the body is a very different proportion to another, thinking balance feels like a place that people can kind of start.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think this has been fun to talk about, and maybe we've gotten some of you who are listening a little bit interested in learning more. I will put in the show notes how you can find Amanda on Instagram if you are curious to connect with her. And the last thing that I want to ask, unless you have more comments, which is of course fine, the last thing I want to ask that I always ask guests is, what is your favorite song to listen to when you want to improve your mood, raise your vibration? And I actually already know that you have two answers for this, so give them both.
Well, I mean, there's so many Swifties out there, so how could I not, pay some homage to my favorite girl? I do love anything Taylor Swift. Reputation album is a favorite for me. But if I'm breaking away from the Swifties out there, the one song that I think always comes on that I just can't help but dance to is Justin Timberlake, Can't Stop the Feeling.
Yes, I love that one. And I love that you said that. And the song from Taylor Swift you mentioned was Ready for It. And so those are fabulous. I love them. And we have a Spotify playlist that I'm gradually adding to with all the songs that my guests, as well as some listeners, are contributing to, that I think is really quite a fun thing for people to listen to. So you can find that in my website, and you will see that in the show notes as well. So Amanda, Amanda, thank you so much. Do you think we missed anything that you had been intending to share with us? Did we catch it all?
Well, there's definitely no way to catch it all, but hopefully I gave some good direction for anybody who's interested in kind of exploring this. I certainly think that, like I said, the fundamentals are something that you can explore on your own. But if anybody is interested in diving a little bit deeper, once they know, their body architecture and really how to work with that, I would be happy to work with anyone.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you.
I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, and leave a review. Let's get this message out further into the world. Make sure you've subscribed as well, and why not grab a screenshot and share it on your social media. Now it's time to head down to the show notes and see the resources I mentioned. Go find what you love.